Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. This is Andrea, president and co founder of the Stigma-Free Society. I am very excited to continue on with our Rural Mental Wellness events where we talk to experts in the field, people with lived experience of stigma and mental health. And today we have Gerry Friesen, and I want to welcome you today. We are so excited to have you. How are you?
Oh, I'm great, Andrea, and thank you very much for having me. I was quite excited when I got the invitation to join you today.
Yes, definitely. How did we reach out to you? How did our staff find you?
I have no idea how they found me, Andrea. I never asked. I just got an email, and I was very quick to respond. And in fact, the Samara, I think her name is, emailed back and said, "Wow, that you sure responded quickly." And that's yeah, let's do
Yeah.
this.
Amazing. Well, I want to share a little bit about you with our viewers and just share your bio. It's very brief, but I think it's really important to get a little bit of a background on Gerry and all the amazing things that he does in the world. And we're going to talk about his story today, question about his journey, and to get some insight into all that he does in the mental health realm, in the agricultural realm as well. So, Gerry refers to himself as the recovering farmer. As such, his passion is helping others find solutions to the various issues that life throws at us. A combination of his own life experiences, training in conflict resolution, and intensive counseling training provide him the tools to help other people who are struggling with their challenges. To learn more about Gerry, visit his website at gerryfriesen.ca, and I'll spell that out and mention that again at the end of this live event. And I would really love, Gerry, if you could start off by just sharing a little bit about yourself, what it was like growing up in a rural community, and maybe some tidbits about you, so we can get to know you.
Well, you know what? I maybe I'm at the age where my journey is rather long. So I sometimes, when people ask me the question, I go, okay, where do I start? Yes, I grew up in southwestern Manitoba on a poultry and grain farm. After high school, I left and moved to southeastern Manitoba for work, and really in the course of about 4 or 5 years, I met a life partner, and we decided to move back to the farm. My dad had decided to move on to a different career, and so my brother and I took over the family farm. You know, I've always liked that rural fabric. Andrea, I shared with you
Mhm.
earlier that 9 years ago we moved to what I call a bedroom community just south of Winnipeg. You know, I'm used to driving down the street or gravel roads, whatever it may be, and everybody waves. And if you don't wave, then you're almost tempted to follow that person to find out what's going on with them that day, right? Because it's just so normal to wave. That doesn't happen here. And so, you know, some of these things I do miss, but that's what rural living is all about. And everybody knows everybody. You meet people, whether it's at the rink or at the grocery store or in a coffee shop. And so it's actually interesting quite often when I kind of commiserate about the fact that, well, maybe I shouldn't have farmed because it didn't turn out that well. My wife always reminds me that the biggest benefit of us being on the farm was the fact that we could raise our kids in rural Manitoba, out in the country, right? And
Mhm.
so I think that's a huge blessing that we've had, and I'm envious of people that can do that.
Yeah. And before I get into conflict resolution and the mediation work that you do, those things are all very interesting. But first, I wanted to talk to you about your personal experience. And you call yourself the recovering farmer. What does that mean?
Well, maybe I'll entail a bunch of the stuff you just mentioned that you said
Yeah.
before we go there, but we'll go there somewhat, I guess.
Yeah.
Started farming, like I said, with my brother in the early 80s. In the 1990s, I was involved in what I call agricultural politics. I was chairman of Manitoba Pork. We went through some significant challenges there. I was involved in other commodity groups. And then in 2000, actually, the new minister of agriculture at the time, appointed me to the Manitoba Farm Mediation Board. Totally out of the blue, totally unexpected, but because of my expertise with hogs, they wanted someone that had hog expertise, and so I was appointed to that. and found out really quickly that I had seemed to have somewhat of a natural ability to get people talking and to, build consensus. And I actually realized that during my time in agricultural politics, I had operated that way as well there. And, instead of pounding the table and negotiating with people, I much rather wanted to build consensus and come up with agreements that would work for everybody. And so,
Mhm.
having discovered that, I actually went back to school, as it were, to get in training in conflict resolution. Did a lot of farm. I've dealt with, I believe, somewhere around 600 farm families that have experienced financial difficulties, and of course, financial stress comes with a whole host of other issues as well. And then in 2007, actually, as we were winding down the farm, I came across an ad in an agricultural publication asking for volunteers for the Manitoba Farm and Rural Stress Line. So I
Mm.
applied and became a volunteer, and very quickly that changed the course of my journey as well. And in between all of this, in 2004, I was actually diagnosed with anxiety and depression. And, at the time, not understanding the intricacies of mental health, the doctor very quickly prescribed some antidepressants. I went on them, and I sometimes say that's the beginning of my journey.
Mm.
But the discovery part of my journey came much later when I was involved with the Manitoba Farm and Rural Stress Line, where through the training I had in counseling, I very quickly began to understand better who I was as a person, what was going on up here, why I was having some of these issues. And so that was a really eye-opening experience for me. But in
Mhm.
2007, as the farm, like I said, the farm was winding down, I had just started my own conflict management business. And so through that, kind of it evolved into me doing, sometimes I say my day job is doing mediation work. And other times I do a lot of presentations on stress management, particularly in agriculture, and of course intertwine that with my own story, because in spite of being diagnosed with anxiety and depression, I certainly wasn't healed.
Mhm.
As we know, that's an ongoing journey, and the journey continues today. There's mornings I still wake up and not sure why I would want to face another day, but through various tricks I've learned, I do it. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Thank you. It's through stories of other people that we find such hope and inspiration, isn't it? And
You,
insight,
oh,
right?
it's amazing. In 2010, when I started telling my own story, I was just absolutely amazed at how people would approach me, even people I had known, right? And never knew that they were struggling, but they would approach me, and because they had heard me talk about it openly, they began talking. And I often maintain, as much as professionals in mental health are very, very important, and I've utilized them, I still often say that talking one on one, just like you and I did for a brief few minutes beforehand, Andrea, talking like that can be more helpful than a lot of other things we try.
Yeah. It's like that peer support, right? And we do
Yes,
training for peer support through the Robin Priest Live Your Truth company through our programming, and we just finished up one for rural communities, and we would love to reach out to you when we do our second cohort, and perhaps you would want to spread the word about that because you have a passion for peer support. Yeah, and I do too personally. I find when you connect with people with lived experience of mental health issues or mental illness, we it helps us find our way.
absolutely. And a lot of it, and I often challenge people to verbalize what's going on in their heads, because when it's in my head, rattling around in my brain, I focus on it, I think about it, I make up, like, there's things that I think are going to happen that never do happen. And that really came to light in 2005, actually.
Hmm.
Um, I was on a motorcycle trip with my brother, and I saw him go ass over tea kettle, as I say. And
Um,
so I had just gone off my medication, and that kind of, because of increased responsibilities now on the farm, that kind of, pushed me over the edge. And I remember a few days after that happened, I came to the farm, and my neighbor dropped by, and just ask, how are you doing? And you know how we are, right? Normally the response would be, well, I'm doing fine or okay or, good, not a problem. But for some strange reason that day I started talking, and for half an hour I just
Wow.
spilled my beans, as it were. And you know what? He didn't sit there and provide judgment or answers. He sat there, he normalized and validated what I was feeling. And when he left, I felt like such a load had been, taken off my back.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just often being heard and having someone sit with you, and just to hear what you have to say. And I know as somebody who has a mental illness myself, I often don't want suggestions, advice, answers of what people think. And although I know people think they're being helpful, sometimes it
Yeah,
just isn't helpful, is it?
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah. So, how do you stay mentally well? Like you say, the recovering farmer, right? So, I'm just curious about what do you do to ensure that your mental wellness stays intact and maintained, and maybe some advice for our watchers.
And that's been a large part of my journey, because those answers weren't easy to come across at the outset. I know back in 20 years ago now, or 15 years ago, I used alcohol, for example, because, as I tell people, and their eyes kind of open wide when I say this, alcohol does an amazing job of easing your anxiety. The problem is, when alcohol leaves the body, the anxiety actually increases double fold or three times as much. And so the only way to combat that is to drink more,
Yeah.
which I did, which doesn't bode well either. So through time, I've had to understand the fact that exercise is very important to me. I'm not a farmer anymore. When I was farming, of course, when you farm, you get all kinds of exercise. So I have to be diligent with that now. During the winter months, I use what I call a happy light, but they're called sad lamps.
Yeah. Yeah.
What an
Seasonal affective
oxymoron, right?
disorder, right?
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have to make sure I eat right. Um, three, four, I can't remember now, 3 or 4 years ago, I was going off the tracks again. And
Mm.
my family told me, Dad, you need to seek help. And I had been to see some psychologists, psychiatrists, mental health workers, counselors, therapists, and none of that really seemed to take hold. And so they actually, and I'm not suggesting to you or to your audience that a naturopath is the answer to everything, but for some strange reason, that day they suggested going to a naturopath, and I went with not a lot of enthusiasm, but that turned out to be the ultimate appointment I've ever had.
Mm.
She very quickly gained an understanding of what was going on, and she said, "Well, in the past you've been treated for a serotonin imbalance, but actually she thought I had a dopamine imbalance." And so she said, protein when you get up in the mornings is very, very important for your dopamine. Well,
Yeah.
so for the last however long ago that is now, 3 years, I think,
Hmm.
I have a protein shake every morning.
Yeah.
And it's interesting how my thoughts about alcohol, how about my thoughts about relationships, all of those things have changed just because of such a simple little step, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's those simple little things that are really helpful. So
Yeah.
those are things I do. I still struggle in the mornings sometimes when during the pandemic, it did
Mm.
it to a lot of people, and it did it to me because I found myself, instead of going out to do my work, I was doing it all virtually.
Mhm.
How to come to an understanding of what these virtual things do to our own minds. And so my mornings were often very difficult, but I can now, because I understand who I am. I know that, yeah, you know what, I'll get up, and I'm an avid golfer, and I do that first thing in the morning. And I get
Mhm.
out of bed and I don't really feel like going golfing, but I also know that an hour later when I tee off, I will feel better. So I know it'll last for an hour, but then I'll
Yeah.
be good again. And
Yeah,
you know what?
sometimes it's just getting out there, right? And, like,
Yeah,
actually just grabbing the reins, like, "Okay,"
exactly.
it's hard to do at first, and then you're like, "I just have to do this," and once you're out there doing that thing, then it feels good, right?
Exactly. It sure does. And you know what? It's being outside, it's being in the company of other people, it's that little bit of social interaction you get, which is very important to us as human beings.
Yeah, exactly. And so for work you've done with farmers, I'm really curious about the passion to work with farmers and to work with individuals in the rural community with the work that you do in the world. And maybe you have a story of impact or just to share about those kinds of things.
Well, and it's interesting when you mention the passion thing because it kind of came about by accident as well. But number one, with and then I should be clear that my farming career ended because of financial difficulties, which I sometimes wish had happened a little sooner so I could have gotten out sooner and done other things. But it is what it is.
Yeah.
So I understood financial struggles. I had my own journey with mental health. And so when I'd sit down with farmers, quite often I was able to connect with them because of my own life experiences. I wasn't sitting there as someone who'd pulled into the yard in a Lexus and said, I'm here to help and trust me, I can't. No. You know what? It's a matter of sitting around a table and helping people make difficult decisions at times. And I remember one time it was a new client and I was sitting at their kitchen table and they were venting and they were quite explicit with their use of, language that I don't normally use, except if I mishit a golf ball, of course. Um, and so I was sitting there nodding and going, yeah, I get it. And finally he looked at me and he says, no, you don't. You have no clue. And then I
Mm.
said to him, you know what? This isn't about me. But in a probably 30 seconds or a minute, I just explained this is what I've gone through in life. So, and his eyes just kind of opened and he went,
Mm.
you do get it, don't you? And so that changed the whole conversation, and we were able to have a really good conversation about difficult topic.
Yeah.
And another farmer that the first time I met him, he actually literally came across the table at me because he was so mad at me, and we actually turned out that we became really good friends after that. So
Wow.
people experience all these different emotions and it's not limited to agriculture. When people own businesses and are struggling, particularly financially,
Hmm.
there's all kinds of emotions that come into play. And so if you can build connection first before you get into the meat of things, it can be really helpful. And I think that's where my passion was born.
Yeah.
And then when I did the farm line thing, sorry, not I'm going on and on here,
No,
but
go on. I'm interested. Go
when
on.
when we talked previously about the stigma, particularly with men, and in 2010, the farm line actually contracted me to facilitate some workshops in southwestern Manitoba called specifically Men and Depression because of
Mm.
that stigma. And so the manager of the farm line came to me after I'd said, yes, I would do these. She said, well, we'd sure like to have a farmer that could tell his own story. And I said, yeah, that's a good idea. And she was intimately aware of my story. So I didn't volunteer at that point, but it didn't take long. She looked at me and says, would you be willing to tell your story? And
Mm.
Andrea, I've never learned to say no in my life. So I said yes
Yeah.
and never thought about it further, right? Well, I shouldn't say I never thought about it. I knew I had to talk to my wife and my kids about
Yeah.
what kind of effect my mental illness had had on them, and that was somewhat eye-opening. But
Mm.
what happened is the kickoff to these workshops was actually a call-in radio show in Brandon, and myself, our manager, and a psychologist went in to do this, and we had barely sat down in the chairs, and the host of the show looked at me and says, well, I understand you have a story to tell.
Mm.
And I kind of went like, back in the day, it was an oh crap moment. In this day and age, I say it's a WTF moment where I just went, you know what? I can either start talking or look like a complete idiot. So I did start
Mhm.
talking. And like
Mhm.
I said before, is when other people started approaching me, when I would share openly and they would talk to me, I realized that this is helping me, but it's
Yeah.
also helping others.
Yeah.
And so that's where that passion to talk about it really was born.
How do you connect with the farmers? Like, how do you find them? Do they reach out to you? How does that work?
Well, a lot of times it's gotten to the point where, yes, they do reach out to me.
Okay.
And I am, I guess, well enough known in Manitoba that whether it's people out there selling feed or selling seed, come across someone that needs help, you should phone Gerry or phone the farm line who have my name and number quite handy. And
Yeah.
so that way, I also do a lot of presentations. I wasn't actually in B. My wife and I were on Vancouver Island 3 weeks before COVID hit to do a
Wow.
presentation there to the Island Agricultural Society, I believe it's called. And
That's where I live. I live on Vancouver
oh, do
Island.
you? Good for you. Awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, we enjoyed that visit.
Yeah.
And I was in Alberta, and I've done a bunch in Manitoba and Saskatchewan as well. So I'm out there
Nice.
talking about it, and the media in Manitoba is quite aware of me as well. So people just get to know who I am, and they like calling, which I am totally fine with.
I love this. This is great that you're getting that awareness and people are reaching out to you and making a name for yourself in the community and nationally. So that is very exciting. And what kind of advice do you give to farmers who are struggling with depression or mental health issues? I know everybody is an individual, unique person with their own set of circumstances, but generally, is there any type of advice that maybe you can give to people who are struggling?
Well, I like to, again, keep it simple. And first
Yeah.
and foremost, I tell people that they need to talk about it. Don't go hide. I know back in the day when my depression hit, I would find the hog barn as being a refuge, which people go, huh? But really, that I was away from my family, um, so I wasn't unloading on them. I was
Yeah.
away from the phone,
Yeah.
and I was in a place where nobody could get to me. I felt safe there, right? And so that's what we do. We're isolated enough in a rural community because, of course, our neighbors are further and further away. And then when we start struggling mentally, we have a tendency to isolate ourselves even more. And that's incredibly dangerous. It might be overstating it, but we need to make sure we step out and we talk. And whether it's
Mhm.
a family member, whether it's a neighbor, and really, quite honestly, there is no shame in seeking professional help. And
Yeah.
I've just had someone approach me in Saskatchewan a while ago and said, "Well, how do you know who the right person is?" And I said, "You know what? I think I visited 6 different professionals till I found someone that all of them could help,
Y
but there was that one that finally got connected dots for me. And
yeah.
again, didn't heal me that day, but connected dots so I could understand better who I am and what I need to do."
Yeah. Yeah. You gotta find the right fit, right? And that one person
Absolutely.
yeah, that one person can make a world of difference, and I know
I
that yeah.
I actually had, after that motorcycle accident I talked about, I had just gone off my antidepressants, and so my wife and I were talking about this and going, "Well, we should try talk therapy first." So
Mhm.
I went to see a psychologist in Brandon, and he listened to me for an hour, and after we were done, he said, "Well, you better go on medication because you can't afford me."
Mhm.
You'll get instances like that where you're just totally turned off
Mhm.
by professionals. But
Yeah.
if that happens, just please go find a second, third, or sometimes even fourth opinion.
Yeah, and don't give up, definitely.
Exactly.
Yeah, and so I know we're talking about mental health management, and you name yourself as the recovering farmer. Are you the recovered farmer? Like, do you deal with, what do you deal with on a daily still? Like, what do you struggle with anything? You talk about healing a lot. Is that an ongoing process or is that something that has resolved for you? I'd love to hear a little about that.
You know what? It's interesting because here's another little story.
Yeah.
So a number of years ago, I did a radio interview, and my sister heard it, and she called me right after, and she says, "What does it mean to be a recovering farmer?" And quite frankly, I hadn't ever given it any thought. Somehow, it just hit me back when I started at the farm line, and I started using that. And so I looked it up. Well, I looked up, to recover means to return to a previous state of health, prosperity, and equanimity.
Mm.
And so, you know what, health, physically, I sometimes jokingly say, well, I'll never, I can't run the marathon, but that's okay. I never could before.
Yeah.
But mentally, you know what, it's a journey. Prosperity, yeah, I lost a lot of valuable time to build a retirement. You know, I can't retire. In fact, I sometimes tell people that my wife tells me I have to work till noon the day of my funeral. Um, but I'm okay with that. It's the
Mhm.
equanimity piece that I struggle with.
Yeah.
And equity means to, oh, now it escapes me. To keep a level head, as it were, even when you're under stress, right?
Right. That balance. Yeah.
Right. And that's something I'd really, really struggle with. I very quickly, when my stress level goes up a wee bit, I find myself being agitated. Sometimes jokingly, and I think it's probably less jokingly than I wish, is driving. You know, my wife and I went into the city today, and I very,
Mm.
very quickly get frustrated with other drivers, right? It makes me agitated. And so I
Yeah.
have to work on myself to sit back and
Mhm.
relax. And but that I would suggest that's the one that I struggle with most.
Yeah.
And further to, will I ever be recovered? No, I don't think I will be.
Mhm.
And so that's real for me, and that's something I can work on, just as long as I make an effort to at least remain level and even maybe improve a little bit.
And I think it's very human, Gerry. Like we all go through things, and I don't think anyone totally recovers perfectly or whatever that is. And for myself, having bipolar, I know that mental illness is a daily challenge, no matter all the great things I've been able to achieve in my career or my relationships. People sometimes just see the face and they don't understand that a lot of us who deal with mental health issues, that it's a daily thing and it is a struggle. And as you were talking about the driving, but you're identifying what you need to work on, and I think that's the key,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's so easy when there's all of this stuff going on, and I've kind of broken mine down to perhaps a smaller piece at this point. But trust me, going back not that long, there was a number
Mm.
of different pieces I had to work on, and
Mhm.
sometimes that can become overwhelming.
Yeah.
And so we have to kind of break it down, and be thankful if you work on one piece in one day, type of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And then that's where mental health professionals, friends, family can come in and help you break down those pieces. And
Absolutely.
yeah, we can't do it all on our own. And I think that's a general message that you've really been getting out today, which I feel is very valuable. So thank you for that. As well, before we go, I like you to just encapsulate your work that you do in mental health. Like I know we talked a bunch about conflict resolution and all of these things, but so when people go to your website, like what are your services? Your consulting business. What will they find there?
Well, I guess, well, the conflict management stuff, of course. Well, I guess I have two websites, but there's a link
Okay.
on the one you mentioned before that links to the mediation one. But really, what I do is I like to present to people. I like to talk about stress management tricks. I like to talk about, recognizing when we're starting to deteriorate mentally. I like to intertwine my own story with it because I know stories are much more impactful than theory, right? Or
Mhm.
so I enjoy doing that. Actually, a colleague of mine who was actually my trainer when I started at the farm line, her and I are now working on trying to put together what we call a Manitoba Farmer Wellness Program. They have
Mm.
one on Prince Edward Island. They've started one in 5 or 6 counties in Ontario, and that's where farmers, their families, or their employees can have face-to-face sessions, appointments with someone that has experience both in mental health, but also is very much aware of the intricacies of agriculture. And so
Mhm.
we're working on doing that. We want it to be a free service. So that's kind of what we're working on now. And I'm looking forward to when we can travel more freely again. I know that some of my presentations in Western Canada were canceled because of COVID.
Mhm.
I've done a bunch by Zoom and by other platforms, which, trust me, Andrea, this isn't the same thing.
Yeah.
So looking forward to doing that some more. That's something I can do. That's something I can contribute, and it's something I do have a passion for.
Nice. We would love to feature and promote what you do and your wellness events and anything you need from us. We would be so happy to get that out there in the world for you. And we can discuss that as we stay on after this call.
Sure.
Yeah. And to close off, Gerry, do you have some inspiring words that you could share with farmers who may be struggling with their mental health or those in rural communities who feel isolated? Is there a message you can send to them?
The clearest message I know is never give up. There is hope and there is relief. Take
I
it from
love that.
someone who knows.
Excellent. Thank you so much. This has been a really fun, enlightening, and lively conversation. So thank you so much for joining me. Stay on the line, and yeah, I'm very happy to have met you.
I appreciated it. I enjoyed being on, Andrea. And, if you invite me out to Vancouver Island again, I wouldn't mind that.
Well, you never know.
Exactly.
Yeah, we definitely need services out here that you offer. And yeah, we'll definitely keep in touch. So, yeah. So, thank you everybody for tuning in today. Please check out Gerry's website. Do you want us to share what that is, Gerry, and spell it out for people?
Sure. GerryFriesen.ca, GerryFriesen.ca.
Perfect. That's where you can find out more. And please, as well, visit our Rural Mental Wellness Toolkit. We would love for everybody to see what we're up to at Stigma-Free Society. If you wish to be a guest on our live events, please do get in touch with us. And have a mentally healthy day, everybody. And thank you so much for tuning in. Take care.